and you've got it. All right. Awesome. All right. So you good? Can you hear me well?
I can hear you well. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you. Fantastic. So we will go. We'll try and knock this thing out in about an hour or so. Okay.
All right.
Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balkavich, and we're back for another edition of the Thyroid Answers podcast. It's the first one of 2021. And normally what I do is I just say hello to my co-host that's usually on the show, Dr. Erica Riggleman. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it today. So I brought in my backup, the co-author of the upcoming book, The Thyroid Debacle, which we're going to talk quite a bit about today, Dr. Kelly Halderman. My friend, my peer, a mentor, just a great resource. How are you today?
I am wonderful, and Happy New Year to you. And I am super excited to fill in for the wonderful Dr. Erica. We wish her well. She is pregnant right now, and so I've been through that 3 times. It's just not the funnest thing in the world. So, all best wishes to her. But I'm so excited to be here, Dr. Erica, because we have so much to talk about in this new year.
Absolutely. So, you've been on the podcast before, but I think we should have people get to know you a little bit better. So they may not know you have a medical background. You're involved in functional medicine, naturopathic medicine. So why don't you give people your story? How did you go from medical doctor into this functional medicine space? And how did you get caught up writing a book with me called The Thyroid Debacle?
Sure. So what's funny is there's a chapter in our book, and it's called Confessions from an Allopathic Doctor. And that's kind of where I think that the really good meaty story is. So you guys, you got to pick it up just to read that. But I'll give you the truncated version, is that I am a family practice trained medical doctor. I graduated from medical school. I did the training, and I was awesome at it. I mean, like, I scored the 99th percentile on my boards. I could match symptoms with pills, no other. It was great. I climbed the ladder of success, was doing it. And then I got really sick. I mean, really sick, where I was having neurological symptoms, migraines. I remember I was delivering a baby on call, and I got this giant scotoma, and I'm like, I can't even see to deliver this child. I mean, like, it was scary. So I had to take a step back, and my colleagues, I was sent to the best neurologist, trying to figure out what I had, and I ended up getting a diagnosis of MS. And at that point, I was like, cool, I'm a medical doctor. I'm surrounded by the best medical doctors on the planet. I'm going to get the best care. Well, the best care was some pills, and we're sorry that your brain is attacking itself. But, we really don't have any answers. So, you should probably step away from medicine, go home and be with your children. And again, it was like a death sentence. And, I was like held to the no. I mean, I it's kind of like medicine failed me personally. And then when I had a minute to take the blinders off, I realized that when people were coming in, and I think about, specific cases where I had a diabetic, and she'd get admitted to the hospital over and over again. And it was just, no one ever talked to her about the real lifestyle changes she needed to make. We talked to her about the insulin sliding scales and adding in more drugs and things. But, I was literally failing people, but I didn't realize it until I was the one who was failed. So I had to walk away. I had to save my own life. I went and got a naturopathic medical degree. I used things like detoxification and good nutrition and, all kinds of really very foundational things that even in our book, we talk about, like breathing, proper breathing. I was a mouth breather my entire life, and I didn't even know the consequences of that. And in our book, you can find that out and you can test that. And simple things equated to me going from death's door to literally, I'm 110% better than I've ever felt in my entire life. I've made a complete health U-turn, and I really credit it to a lot of the knowledge that I gained from Dr. Eric. When I was still really trying to claw my way out of the chronic disease hole I was in, I actually had Lyme disease and mold and a lot of things that people have that are commonly misdiagnosed because it can set off this cell danger response, which we talk about in the book. I looked to Eric, I watched his podcast, I listened to everything, and I started to understand that, really my body, it really wasn't doing anything wrong. It was really trying to save my life. We talk about this cell danger response. And so I really, made that jump from medicine to the naturopathic approach. And what I really strive for in my practice is the root cause. Get at the root cause, because the body doesn't make mistakes. Your body doesn't make mistakes. You have to honor your physiology. And a lot of really well-meaning practitioners, brilliant doctors, they've really kind of got it backwards. And a lot of people, practitioners, are confused. And this sets them straight. Dr. Eric, and what we've written in this book, this will set you straight. So I'm just very excited to even be here on this podcast again with you. And I've written this amazing book with you, Dr. Eric.
Well, I think the key is that when we're having that discussion, right? So you've actually lived, allopathic medicine, had your struggles, come to functional medicine. And I think one of those things that's really important, and we got to be careful of, is both of these professions both have a place, right? Allopathic medicine, you've got a husband who's a physician as well. So it's not that there's this general consensus that, hey, medicine's bad, functional medicine is good, right? That's not really what it is. Both have a place. But the challenge in allopathic medicine is that they're really good at acute care and really good at disease management. Hey, this is a process that's going downhill. We're just going to manage it as it progressively many times gets worse. Sometimes they can bring people to a point where they actually feel and function better, but they're still really maybe not well, right? Because they still need the drugs to continue to take on a daily basis to help them achieve a certain state of suboptimal health, right? I say suboptimal health because if you had optimal health, you wouldn't need the medications. Right. So there's a role there, but there's a different role for functional medicine, which is really to get at diet, nutrition, lifestyle, and really the focus should be on and trying to identify those root cause issues that cause dysfunction, hopefully address the dysfunction before it actually becomes the pathology where we actually sometimes really do need medicine to step in and say, well, you've got a massive tumor, we got to get that out. Your gallbladder's diseased. It's not savable at this point in time. Your colon's eroded and it's leaking. These are issues that need crisis care, right? And if you're bleeding out from a car accident, don't come to me as a functional medicine practitioner. Go to the emergency room. So we both have places, and you have probably the best ability to be able to see those both sides as both a medical doctor and a functional medicine practitioner. The challenge becomes is that you're trained from this allopathic perspective. And in my background as a medical technologist, similar type training. And so to change to this idea and this concept that the body doesn't make mistakes, that the body's its physiology typically adapts first. And if you're in adaptation for an extended period of time, pieces can start to break down and cause disease. We would not deny that. But really, what we want to be able to do is catch that dysfunction and create and identify those things that are causing the body to start to adapt and eventually start into dysfunction before they get too far, and then bring people back. And we are trained on the diet, the lifestyle, and the supplementation protocols. Often we hear people say, well, if you guys are talking about this in functional medicine, why doesn't my medical practitioner know that or agree with it? And that's like a question I want to ask you. You can probably explain this better than anybody. The functional medicine training and your naturopathic medicine training are a bit different than the allopathic training, right?
Oh, absolutely. Night and day. And what comes to mind is that quote from the New England Journal of Medicine saying that interventions that are solid in the medical research, it takes 17 years to get into your doctor's office, right? We didn't say that. We didn't make that up. That's in the literature. So 17 years is a really, really long time. And actually, doctors are actually critiquing themselves about, hey guys, this is way too long, what's going on? They're trying to fix it. Doctors like Dr. Kent Holthorpe, he writes about this leg. And so we look, when I was in that medical box, you're given tools, and these are the tools that you must use. These are the tools that your comrades are using, and you're all in this box together. And sometimes I feel like when I was practicing and I was using these tools, I was using these guidelines, it's that you don't, when you're a part of this, what I call in the book, the club, and you start looking around and everybody's doing the same thing, and you start to go, what's going on? You feel crazy. Even though it's very logical, that, I couldn't understand why no one could tell me, why. So Hashimoto's, right? Okay, so the body, the autoimmune attack, and the body's gone, I was taught the body's gone haywire, it's gone offline, you're just killing your thyroid. And I thought, why? I mean, why is nobody in this practice, no one that I've ever met in medicine, why is no one asking why? And so it's almost like I felt like the oddball. But then when I stepped away from medicine, I was joined by thousands of people who think like you, Dr. Eric, where it's like we leveled up. But when you're in that medical box, and again, my husband's a medical doctor. I love him. My friends are medical doctors, but it's just something about the way the system is set up. It's really not inclined for change. And honest to God, change is what saved my life. If I would have been in that, stayed in there, and I probably would have happily stayed in that box if I wouldn't have gotten sick, because we are, and I hate to use this term, but we are a little brainwashed. I mean, in the sense of, you think that everything you're doing is the best thing. And that's why medical doctors, they are doing their best. They absolutely are. They absolutely are. So I don't know if that answered your question,
Yeah, it's
but
just,
that's kind of how.
yeah, they're working within their training, within their bias. And so if you're told this is the way it is, this is how we teach it, this is the way you do it, then, and everybody else is doing it, why would you go outside that model, right? And somebody might say, well, I still have signs and symptoms. Well, yeah, but in the allopathic model, if you have other signs and symptoms, then I give you other medication to manage it. I mean, that's what we do, right?
Yep.
So there's always this kind of frustration, like I listen to a podcast, or I read a blog, and it's a functional medicine blog, and now I want to go to my primary care physician or my endocrinologist, and they're only running TSH and free T4. Why is that? Why would you not, as a medical doctor, not run the whole panel? And we can have this discussion back and forth, but in your training, you probably weren't trained, or the guidelines didn't state to you, Dr. Kelly, when you have a patient with hypothyroidism, you run a TSH, a total T4, a total T3, a free T4, a free T3, reverse T3, thyroid antibodies, TSI. You weren't, that's not the training, right?
Right. That is absolutely not the training. And so I couldn't be faulted for not, the patients could line up all day long and come in and ask me, and I'd say, no, because that's just not what I was trained to do. And that's not what all my colleagues, nobody's doing that. I'm so sorry. So it's really not personal. It's really not. It's just objective. It's just like that's just how it is.
And so somebody might say, but why, if this functional medicine doctor is saying this full panel is important, why wouldn't you think it's important too? And so to me, it's all based on the training and the guidelines, because if your training is, I only need 2 tests to assess thyroid physiology, a TSH and a free T4, I only need those 2 tests to actually prescribe medication, nothing else is relevant, right? And what am I going to do with those other tests, because I don't have a drug to do anything with those things, and it doesn't change the treatment? If you saw, as a medical physician, if you saw a high reverse T3, does that change the medical treatment, right? It shouldn't, because the only thing you're trying to do is lower TSH, right, back into an optimal range, or as low as possible, is what some docs are doing, trying to drive it as low as possible, which I think is probably one of the worst things we can do. But am I right with what I'm saying from a medical perspective? Those tests don't have value because they're not used as part of the assessment. They're not used as part of the treatment requirements to prescribe, and they're not part of the monitoring in allopathic medicine. And therefore, many times, not only does the doctor not want to do it because it doesn't help them with diagnosis, it doesn't help them with treatment, and insurance companies often might deny it because it's based on those principles, it's not medically necessary, right?
Right, nailed it. That's it.
So when you come to naturopathic medicine and this whole kind of naturopathic medicine, and maybe that's a good discussion to have for listeners too, because a lot of times people are confused. What's a medical doctor? What's an integrative physician? What's a naturopathic physician? What's functional medicine? How do these things differ? So from your perspective, the difference between allopathic medicine and naturopathic medicine, and then explain if you think there is a difference between naturopathic medicine and functional medicine.
So when I was trying to make my exit strategy from allopathic medicine, I had a really great mentor who said to me, you know, you might not want to jump into a naturopathic, you know, you might not want to go to that, because he said you'd be trading a statin for red yeast rice.
Greenwashing, maybe, to some degree, right?
Right, exactly. And I went, I mean, that really was just like a moment in time. It was like a sliding door moment for me where I'm like, no, I don't want to do that, because that wouldn't have helped me. And that wasn't helping me. What was helping me was really digging down deeper, right? So I would say that there's so many different terms out there. You're right, like Eric, there's medical doctor allopathic, and then there's functional medicine practitioners, and there's naturopaths, and there's all kinds of TCNs, and I mean, there's so many things after people's names. But I think when it comes down to the principles that, and even what's behind your name doesn't really dictate what your principles are. Because I know some medical doctors who think so much above and beyond even like the what I just used as a statin. They don't jump to the red yeast rice. They go for like, what is going on? What is root cause? I mean, they're after the root cause. So, you know, if we're going to talk about trying to vet someone, you really want to talk about, are they into protocols or principles, right? We talked about this. Is the principle behind the way they practice trying to find out what is driving your disease? Or is it to cover up your disease with a pharmaceutical or a nutraceutical, right? We see people come in with suitcases full of supplementation, but I'm not on any medication, but you're on a truckload of supplementation. And how do you feel? Well, I kind of feel as worse as I did when I was taking the pharmaceuticals, right? So that's where it's like, maybe your practitioner's more into the principle of treating your symptoms, right? With the nutraceutical. So you got to be careful about that. You know, the healthier I got, the less things I need to take, right? I did have a suitcase of supplementation because I went from one mindset, it takes time, right? So I went from like, okay, we're going to be in the medical medicine, and then we're going to go to the, where you're going to use supplementation. And I love supplementation. I mean, Professional Health Products is an amazing company, and I work for them, and I love their supplementation. And with COVID, we need to be smarter about being nutrient repleted and so on and so forth. But I'm saying, back to the principles behind it, the principles, and that you will find in part 3 of our book. That is how I live in this wonderfully healthy body. It's not because I take 17 things. There's no magical thing. It's because I stack one fitness factor on top of the other, and I'm completely obsessed with making sure that they're optimized.
Yeah, and I think the key there is like we all use supplementation and functional medicine as a tool to help us get better, but we want to use those things strategically. I mean, some of my patients definitely, I may have them on, I try and have them on as few things at one time. I'm a minimalist when it comes to supplementation compared to some others, but I think the least somebody can take at one time, and we can manipulate one supplement at a time, then we can really see what the impact of that one thing is. And we can, if we're working with them closely, then we can make changes on the fly. So we're not against supplementation, but as Kelly said, as your practitioner, right? As a functional medicine practitioner, we should be following a set of principles where the goal is to address root cause issues, which is what we talk about all in the book. Unfortunately, it's many times not the sexy things that people want to deal with and address, right? And they're things that people need to do. But our role as the functional medicine practitioner should not just to be replace medications with supplements. That's not functional medicine. I don't care what the initials are after the name. And you can have a really good allopathic physician who has a functional mindset, like let me get to the root cause issue. And you can have a not very good functional medicine practitioner who's not a root issue. They're just like, oh, take this, take that, take this, take that, and just take it well, how long? Forever, right? Well, now I'm up to 16, 17, 18, 20, 30. I mean, the most supplements that somebody's come into my practice so far that they're taking on a daily basis is 36 different bottles of supplements every day. And they're taking 1 to 5 to 6 capsules out of their, you're talking hundreds of supplements per day, and there's no way that can be good. I mean, just to give people an explanation, if you bomb tons of zinc because it's, the flu or COVID, you might think that's great because it boosts your immunity, but that zinc is typically in balance with something called copper. And so if you load up on zinc, you deplete your copper, now you trigger a problem with iron regulation, and you can actually initiate an anemia pattern, which is going to do more for you more likely you're going to get sick from just being functionally anemic than the zinc was going to benefit you, right?
Right on.
So we have to consider more is not always better. And at some point, if you're just taking 20 supplements to feel as lousy as you are, you have to start to consider that maybe I don't need these. Maybe this is the wrong strategy. And maybe the person that I'm working with isn't really practicing functional medicine. What they're practicing is the greenwashing of allopathic medicine. Okay. So now I wanted to kind of dive into your journey into functional medicine. And because I think, and I might be wrong, but I see a lot of people in my practice, almost the vast majority of people come to me have hypothyroidism, okay, as the thing that they think is wrong that we need to fix. And we'll talk about that in a second. But even in functional medicine, when I learned about functional medicine, we learned about that, okay, allopathic medicine just thinks it's
a gland.
It's a gland, goes out of control, that just stops working, right? Many allopathic docs either don't test for antibodies because, I think it's thought that up to 90% of the cases of primary hypothyroidism are caused by an immune attack on the gland. But you ask, when people are like, no, I just have primary hypothyroidism, my gland just faded out. Well, it's probably Hashimoto's. Well, why didn't my doctor run the antibody? Well, probably because he already assumed that 90% of the cases are. And in the allopathic model, there isn't a treatment for the autoimmune issue. It's just the immune system is going to damage the gland. You're going to need thyroid hormone. That's just the way it's going to be.
Train's going, yeah.
Right. And in general, I think you were taught as an allopathic physician, the primary treatment is T4. It wasn't T4, T3, it wasn't T3 only, it was T4, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So now you come to functional medicine, right? And there's integrative medicine, which is another term we can use. But what I learned was that, okay, now everybody started to learn is, oh, the immune system is actually creating the damage. Most of this is autoimmune. And now we need to figure out what's upregulating the immune system. But I think there was still this concept that the immune system was out of control when it came to what was going on. Like, immune system's out of control, it's Hashimoto's, this is just devastating. And you got to get rid of gluten. If you get rid of gluten, there's all these little hot spots. But we still saw to some degree that it was a couple concepts I think were missing. One was that it was an immune system out of control, that the primary problem was happening at the gland, right? Not at the cell level. And that you'd see physicians who were going to be more integrative or more functional, switching from T4 only and saying, well, obviously T4 only, that's a medical perspective. The gland makes both T4 and T3. So we're going to give combination therapies, Armour, NP thyroid. Or you saw these really out on the edge physicians prescribing T3 only. And from my opinion, and you can voice your opinion, I think for the vast majority of people, if they're not doing well in T4 and they switch to T4, T3, they're likely to have a honeymoon period where they feel a bit better, and then they're going to crash again. And then they're going to be tinkering with the dose again. And then they may transition to T3 where they may feel that honeymoon period, where they may feel good again, but then they're going to feel worse and worse, because that's what I see in my practice. And for the listener, the reason I believe that that's probably not a great strategy, although it sounds more integrative and it sounds better, the issue is what Kelly and I talk about in the book is that hypothyroidism, from the perspective, in most cases that I see, at least in my practice and cases that Kelly see, hypothyroidism starts at the cell level. It's an adaptation to excessive cell stress that initiates a danger response. That's when hypothyroidism starts, because when you have that excessive danger response, the cell needs to turn down normal metabolism and turn up the immune inflammatory response. Unfortunately, that makes you not feel good because your hormones aren't working, your digestion's not working, you're tired,
your brain's not working.
Your brain's not working. And we think of that as such this bad thing. And I'm more inflamed and I'm more puffy, and we think about that as the bad thing. But really the cell is trying to protect itself. And the analogy I always use with new people when I'm doing a discovery call is, your thyroid physiology is now broken. It's adapting to the immediate problem. And I always say, listen, if you were cooking for your family, you had 4 burners on, your kids are sitting around your kitchen island, and somebody came in and started attacking one of your children, are you going to continue to cook? Right? You wouldn't do it, Kelly, right? You got kids, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to go defend your children, right? Are you going to take the time to turn off all the burners and put everything in nice little glass Tupperwares, right? You're not going to do that. And you're going to stay in that defensive protective mode. And for the cells, it's an inflammatory mode, and they've turned down normal cell metabolism. You're not growing, you're not developing, you're not making enzymes, you're not making things that are going to make your muscle stronger or create more energy, because all that time and attention is going to cell defense. And how long are you going to stay in cell defense? You're going to stay in that cell defensive mode, not until you've gotten that one person that came in and started creating problems, but until you are literally convinced that there's nobody outside and nobody else is coming in, right? Not until the police come. And still at that point, you're still going to be in a mindset for a while that something could happen. And that's what we talk about in the book as the cell danger response. And one of the biggest things I see is that people assume in both allopathic and functional medicine is that all we need to do is put more stuff in, normalize a couple blood values, and everything's going to work.
Yeah, it's like sending like the mom flowers and candy and trying to get, when she's like defending off and she's like, I don't care about any of that stuff.
Yeah, none of that stuff matters, right?
That's a great analogy. I love it.
The problem is that now we come in as the doc, right? And what do we see? We see the burnt food. right? And we go, here's the problem. Kelly's a terrible cook, right? So, we got to deal with this. And what we don't realize is, and we would say like Kelly is just a terrible cook. She doesn't pay any attention to the cooking. She just doesn't pay any attention. She's terrible at it. And that's what we need to address, right? She's got to be a better cook. What we don't know, or we're not paying attention to, is what took Kelly's attention away from these things, right? What took your cell's attention away from growth and development and put all the focus on cell defense? That's what we're trying to get across in this book, is it's not about whether you need T4, oh, that's allopathic, and instead the more natural way to do it is T4, T3, or 2 T3. And I make arguments why, when you're in a cell danger response, why that's such a bad idea for people, okay? But
like turning up the burners, right? It's just more chaos. It's not the answer.
right, it isn't. And somebody might say, but my TSH is more normal. But that doesn't mean that we fixed the intruder. It doesn't mean we changed Kelly from being in a constant danger response to a state where she can go into a healing response. And that's one of the big things I see, and you can comment on that, is people, when the stress starts to come down, they may assume that the problem's fixed. But just because you got rid of the intruder doesn't mean you're back into normal mom mode, right? You're still in defense. You're still on edge. And what people need to realize, that cells and tissues don't actually start healing and really start repairing and restore normal cell-to-cell communication, which is the last part of healing, until the danger response is actually gone. So you're not going to put more thyroid hormone into a system that's trying to downregulate it. If the system's in a chronic cell stress response, more thyroid hormone won't fix it, right?
What does the literature say about putting more thyroid hormone into that situation?
Well, the key is that the hypothalamus, like an area in your brain, right, is 10 times more sensitive to thyroid hormone than the peripheral tissue. And somebody might say, well, what is that? Why is that important? Well, if you're in excessive stress state, right, what do you need to work? You need your brain to work, right? Do you need to, if you're being chased by the proverbial tiger, are you stopping to have a meal? Probably not. You're going to get eaten, right? You're not going to stop and have, a little liaison and some sex while the tiger's chasing you, because you're going to get eaten. You're not going to take a deep sleep because the tiger's going to eat you, right? And so the same is true in real life. When you get to that point where you're in a danger response, a couple of things happen. One, your brain quickly converts T4 to T3 and gets T3 to those receptors. Fire up the synapses in your brain. That fires up something called your sympathetic nervous system to be like fight or flight. I'm ready to go. But the problem is that when you're in that sympathetic state and you've flooded the brain, the rest of the body is in a danger mode as well. And so those cells are saying, hey, we need to slow metabolism down. Brain's flooded with thyroid hormone. Now you start to get the deactivation of the primary enzyme that converts T4 to T3, and that's deiodinase 2. So it gets what we call ubiquinated or turned off. So the more you drive TSH down, the more the hypothalamus gets flooded, the more you ramp up your sympathetic nervous system, and the more, and this is hard concept for some people to believe, but the lower you drive it down, if you still have that danger response going on in the periphery, the more likely your peripheral hypothyroid symptoms are to get worse. So like I had a lady the other day who's on T3 therapy, and the more she goes on the more, and she just keeps feeling lousy, so they keep upping the dose, right? So she's like an anxious mess, right? Can't sleep, insomnia, anxious, but she's like, I am gaining weight every time. This cannot be possible. My doctor and endocrinologist both said it cannot happen. I said, it absolutely can happen, because that T3 crosses the barriers and gets into the cells much easier than the T4. It quickly drops your TSH. It quickly upregulates your sympathetic nervous system. And now you start ubiquitinating the deiodinase 2, you can't convert hormone. But that deiodinase enzyme, the deactivating enzyme, is already on. So you've got this one hormone and one enzyme that's increasing the deactivation of T4 and T3. And then you've got the one that should be converting T4 to T3, and that one's being turned off. So you actually make the hypothyroid state worse in the peripheral cells. So,
for the listener, don't you wish you could just take Dr. Eric with you to your endocrinologist,
yeah.
or, have him on FaceTime and be like, hiya, right? I mean, that's some nerdy, awesome stuff there, Dr. Eric.
But the issue is that this is what we need to be doing in functional medicine, is helping our clients understand and they come to me, they come to you, and they say, wow, what dose should I be on? Should I be taking T4? Should I be taking T4, T3? Should I be taking T3? Look, there's a minimal amount of thyroid hormone that you need in the system to make it work good. We would all agree to that, right? And if you have to start with a medication, probably T4, in my opinion, for most people, is the best option to start with. And tyrosine, a gluten-free version, is a version I typically tell people to do. Some people might do well on Armour. Some people might do well on T3. Everybody's a little bit different. That's the most important thing. But the key concept we want you to learn, both if you're our clients or if you're reading the book, is it's not about which kind of potion or mixture is the best. It is, why are the cells and tissues trying to deactivate the thyroid hormone? Why is the thyroid hormone adapting? And what I try and tell patients all the time is that thyroid hormone is really the dimmer switch to either turn up growth and development, like the power plant, or to turn that down. And as you turn down the level of thyroid hormone in the cell, it actually upregulates that immune, inflammatory, defensive position. We talk about this concept called the cell danger response, which is the body's way or the way the cell changes the physiology to adapt to danger. And every step of the cell danger response involves thyroid hormone and thyroid physiology, and most of it involves the turning down or the deactivation of thyroid hormone.
Right. So, you mentioned intruders. All right. Can I do the interview, or can you go into those intruders? Talk a little bit about what can be the intruders.
Yeah, so people always say but what's the cause? I went gluten-free and it's not better. Look, there's lots of things that can be contributing to cause. Emotional stress, mindset, trauma, perseveration, all those things that drive higher levels of emotion, worry, concern, trauma, those can be a stressor. It changes your body chemistry, right? And we're not saying you're crazy, we're not saying you're nuts, but if you have a lot of emotional stress going on, there is a max capacity that your cells, your tissue, your body can handle before it triggers the danger mode, okay? And the other key point is it's usually not one of these things that causes the issue. Sometimes it is, but most times it's what we call the load, right? The load of stuff that creates the problem. So we've got emotional stress. And so we talk about in the book, emotional fitness. How do you get control of your emotional state? How trained is your mind, and you in particular, to get, when you feel that excessive stress building, that increased anxiousness, emotion, what are you doing to build your ability to tolerate more, right? Because a lot of people say I can tolerate a lot of stress, and those are usually the people that can't tolerate a lot of stress because they're already in anxiousness and anxiety. They're just used to dealing with a lot, but they don't tolerate it well. But if you can work on skills that help improve your emotional fitness, you're going to be able to adapt much better, right? Stress is not a bad thing. Like you and I would both would agree that stress isn't bad, right? There's stress challenges the body, makes us stronger, makes us tougher, as long as we allow for recovery from that stress, right? Running the person who ran the first marathon, right, died, right? Because that was a massive stress that they weren't trained for. Right. But now, if you're trained right, you can run hundreds of miles in a race and not die, right? If you're trained up. So stress is good. We need some, but we don't need to be always above the threshold that creates a danger response. We need to occasionally push the threshold, sometimes go into the threshold that activates a danger response, but then come right back out of it. And I just don't think that's what a lot of people are able to do in today's world. So we talk about other stressors. We've got chemistry. I mean, think about all the toxins in our food, in the things we put on our body, the things we put in our body, the air quality, the air environment. I mean, we're inundated with chemicals. And while most people would argue, who are involved in those industries, that these things don't create problem. We tested this one thing and it doesn't, if it's under this amount of particles, it doesn't create a problem. Well, maybe, but we've also got 100 other chemicals that are contributing to that may be creating an issue, right? So we got chemical stress, we've got environmental stress, we got, anybody can argue, does holding your phone to your ear, does the Bluetooth, does all this 5G, we don't truly know what the science of that is, because nobody's really done that science on what the outcome of these things are going to be yet. But it's another piece to the load. So we've got radiation that we're exposed to. We have physical stressors like radiation. We have physical stressors like overtraining, undertraining, too much activity, too little activity. We have dietary stress, right? Like what we eat on a daily basis can massively contribute to your issues, right? I mean, we've got so many people eating the standard American diet, and we wonder why that's a problem, right? Well, processed foods, processed sugars, hydrogenated and damaged oils that we're consuming, tons of sugar. I mean, there's lots of problems, but food can create a major issue. You've got disrupted sleep patterns that can be a massive stressor to the system, because sleep is critically important to health and well-being. You can't cheat it. I mean, you can. I went decades cheating sleep with about 4 to 5 hours sleep a night. And
how'd that work for you? How'd that work out
for you? You become Hashimoto's and insulin resistant is what you do. But the good part about it is, if you identify what the stressors are that are unique to you, and you increase your level of fitness in all these categories, not only can you feel better, but you can see that you don't have these disorders anymore. I mean, for years I had Hashimoto's. I had a really significant issue with Raynaud's, which is a condition where you lose the circulation to your extremities. I haven't had that in years, because I changed some of the things that I was doing that were creating excessive stress. We talk about organisms can create stress. So Lyme and viruses and mold and all these things are parasites and dysbiosis in your bowel. There's lots of things that can create stress. Not one of them may be the thing, which I think is what people get confused of. I gave up gluten and I still have a problem, right? Because that was only part of the load, right? Mm-hmm. If we took 2 cinder blocks and put a big board across them, right, and we started stacking 5-pound weights on it, that board is eventually, under the weight, is going to start to bow. And eventually, if you put enough weight on it, it's going to break, right? But which 5-pound weight that I put on it was the one that did it? Was it the last one? Or was it the other 50 pounds that I had on there that weakened it? And the last one, small as it might be, was enough to push me from manageable to danger, right? So we talk about all of those stressors that could drive that danger response. And then in part 3, we go about talking about how to address and improve those, what we call the fitness factors. If you want to be healthier, you have to have a high level of fitness in each one of these categories or each one of these factors.
Right, exactly. And, make it really tangible and practical for the listener too. It's like we have a list of issues, and it can be, we want to lose weight, we want to get rid of our brain fog, we want to have really nice looking skin, et cetera, et cetera. And optimizing the fitness factors will not only what Dr. Eric talks about, it'll align your physiology, cell danger response, but the practicality is that those things will happen. You will follow suit. Your body will just start working the way it was supposed to, designed to work, you know, and again, it's not because you're in the cell danger response, it's not working the way it's not supposed to work, but, you know, just for me, when I start to experience, you know, like, okay, I put on a couple extra pounds, or if I, you know, these things that are practical to me, that it's like, I'm not aligned, I go back to the fitness factors. I go, which one am I not optimizing? And sometimes when I'm like putting on a couple extra pounds, it's that I'm just not paying attention to sleep. And I just need to put more, it's not that I need to change my calories or I need to stop doing this. I mean, people, there's so much bad information out there. It drives us insane. And so this is the manual. This is literally like how, you know, Eric's kind of old, you guys, but he really looks young and he is so in shape. Like, I mean, you can run circles around like, you know, like 20-year-olds, and like, you know, I'm not tooting my own horn, but like, I don't diet. I don't do gimmicky things. I don't do, you know, anything, but I look really healthy and I feel really healthy. And it's, again, it can be just, I have to remember to practice breathing. Maybe that's the reason why, you know, like I'll go back to these fitness factors. And, you know, again, we have lots of clients and people who go, oh, if I only would have known, you know, if I only would have known, like, I'm so sick of trying to like get on these fad diets and keto, da, 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 da. I mean, it drives people insane, especially when it's New Year's, right? And everybody has these New Year's resolutions, right? So again, I'm just so happy and excited to get this into your hands. And we get a lot of questions about courses as well. And, you know, stay tuned for that. So do you want to kind of give us, Dr. Eric, the timeline of where we're at with the book? Should we kind of get into?
Yeah. So obviously we had, the original plan was to have this book out early in 2020, right? The challenge was something came about, I think they call it COVID, something like that. And everything got pushed out, got pushed back, publishing issues became an issue. And so in the fall of 2020, we had a conversation with our publisher, and they really wanted us to wait a year to get the book out. But you and I, this has been, it's a thing we want to get done, get out, because this is, if anybody if you haven't written a book before, it sounds easy, right? You just write some stuff and put it out there. If you've written a book before, you know how this is, right? Because you write something, and then every time an editor or somebody has asked you to look at it, you're like, if I got to change it, I almost have to you almost have to rewrite it. And where your mind was at the time you wrote the first thing, now you have a different mindset. You've learned some new things, and you almost have to rewrite it. So at some point in time, you know, especially, I know for me, I think so for you as well, you just want to get it out the door and get it finished. So what we wound up doing was leaving the publisher, because we just want to get it done, hired a new editor. We've got that book into a position now where we've got to get some proofreading finished up. We got to get some pictures finished up. But our goal is to have the book out this quarter if possible, or early second quarter at the latest. And then as it comes out, obviously in the next couple months, I mean, we're going to be talking about it more. We'll be putting out more information about, hey, here's the actual date. And so we'll get those things out. I know a lot of people have contacted me and said, hey, it's already sold out. It didn't come out yet. And the reason it didn't come out yet is just because of what happened with COVID and switching of editors. But we have a commitment to get that book out early to 2021. So it will be out, and we'll get it out. And then our next goal is to really help people learn the concepts that we talk about in the book, which is, hey, think of what's going on from this very simple standpoint, like we talked about. This is, your physiology is not broken. And I think that's a great way for people to think. I'm not broken, I'm adapting to something, right? Versus I'm broken. I think that's the most helpless place you can be when somebody tells you you have a disease, your body's letting you down. That is like the worst feeling you can have. Like you're in the bottom of the pit, you can't get out. I mean, you were there, right?
Yeah.
And so we want you to understand that from an allopathic perspective, a functional medicine perspective, our take in this book is a little bit different than both of those. because what we're saying is your thyroid physiology isn't typically broken. And the reason I say that, even if you have hypothyroidism and you have primary hypothyroidism, why do I say that? Because I have patients every day that come to me on high doses of thyroid medication, feel terrible. And then as we work on them, their doses continue to go down and down and down. And many of them wind up coming off thyroid medication altogether and able to maintain normal levels. Why? Everybody says, well, what are you doing to treat the thyroid? I'm doing most times, rarely doing anything to actually treat the thyroid. I'm rarely ever doing anything directly to try and fix conversion of T4 to T3 because I don't think it's broken. I'm not trying to force thyroid hormone into a cell because I don't think it needs to be forced. I think for me, and you can comment on this too, the focus is what's causing the excessive cell stress. How do I reduce that? And then the physiology will improve. I had a lady the other day who said, I have gut issues. I know you're a thyroid doctor. So do you know anything about GI issues at all? Do you address hormones at all? And I said to her, listen, ma'am, A, your thyroid's not broken, A, and all those other issues you have, those are adaptations to the same thing. It's excessive cell stress. And everything you don't have a separate adrenal issue. You don't have a separate hormone issue. What you have is a multi-system adaptive disorder, if you want to call it a disorder, where multiple systems are trying to adapt. If I'm not giving you time and attention, or I'm not putting time and attention to that food, it's going to start to get overcooked and burn, right? And people start to have adrenal issues and they start to have gut issues. It's not because your body's broken, at least initially, it's because the body is adapting. I'm taking energy away from hormones and all these things. So you should absolutely expect that if you have problems in your thyroid physiology, by the time your thyroid gland is hypothyroid, you should absolutely expect that other systems should be compromised. You should have excessive histamine. You should have adrenal issues. You should have gut issues. That shouldn't be things that surprise somebody. That should be things that say to people, yeah, the more things I see going on, the harder the body's been working to adapt and the longer it's been working to adapt. And you have two choices. The one approach is you start treating all those peripheral things as if they're separate disorders, or you get to work looking at what those root cause issues are. And as you reduce the excessive stress, take the danger response away, then the body goes from danger response to healing response, and those systems can start to come back online. You might need to nurture some of those systems back into normal function because they've been dysfunctional or out of normal function for so long, but that's the best strategy in my opinion. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, took the words right out of my mouth. That is the way back. And we've been beating our heads for a long time against the proverbial wall of, medication, more medication, switch to a natural medication. It's not working. I mean, so really, when you read this book and you listen to Dr. Eric and you listen to what we're saying, it really makes intuitive sense, doesn't it? It really, the analogy just really nails it. And so we're just excited. We're just excited to spread this message and to really change what, is broken.
Yeah, what we're hoping is that this just helps people understand a different way to look at the physiology. From if you're a regular everyday person, whether you're a person with hypothyroidism, whether you're a person with any kind of disorder, or if you're a functional medicine practitioner, naturopath, or medical doctor, we want to help people just change that paradigm a little bit in their mind so they're not going, I'm broken, my body's adapting, what am I adapting to? How can I reduce the stress load to a point where I can get a chance to get into recovery mode so that I can then take on more stress? Because it's not about having less stress. That's never going to happen.
Right.
But you need a period of recovery or you wind up in constant danger response. And that's how you have that downward spiral of health. And there's only so much functional medicine can do if you don't reduce the excessive stress response. You have to get that back under control. And if you do, what I think most people find is, I thought I was tolerating a lot of stress before and I really wasn't. And now I seem to be able to manage work stress better. I manage the life stress better. I can do more physical activity, which is all more stress, right? So I always liken it to, running, because it's what I'm so familiar with. But I wouldn't take somebody who's never run before and put them on a 26-mile run. I mean, they will die, right? Potentially. But you build them up, let them recover. Build them up, short run, let them recover. Longer run, let them recover. Longer run, let them recover. And if you do that over a 12-week period, almost anybody can run a marathon. But you couldn't do it on the first day with no training. Matter of fact, without training, you really could struggle. I tested that myself just to see what would happen. Right. It's not pretty, okay? So I think we beat this down, right? I think this is a really good conversation to have. I appreciate you coming on and taking Erica's place. If somebody wants to know more about Kelly, Dr. Kelly Halderman, her practice, maybe working with you as a client, where do they go?
Sure. So my website has been under construction for some time now, but the developer said any day now, drkellyhalderman.com should be back online. I have a massive Facebook page, so you can always get a hold of me there, Dr. Kelly Halderman. I'm on social media, other social media rather. So, I mean, if you have any questions, really, you can just email me at info@drkellyhalderman.com.
Great. So we're going to wrap this up. Kelly, thank you so much for being a friend, a mentor, a peer. Thanks for helping with the book. It's been great to partner with you and I can't wait to see where we go in the next year as things start to open up and we get the books out and we start to maybe helping teach some coursework both online maybe and in live with people. So we'll see what the future holds. But thanks for coming on. Thanks for sitting in for Dr. Erica. Have a fantastic day. And for all the people listening, if this podcast helps, share it with your friends, share it with your family. We don't really care if they have hypothyroidism because the hypothyroidism is the effect of this excessive cell stress in all of us under, especially in today's world, higher levels of stress. So thanks everybody and stay tuned for the next episode in the coming weeks.